We've got two guests with me here today, Gail Scott Spicer and Jessie Fajemisin. They are both Neds, and I'm really looking forward to sharing some of their stories with you. We've got Jessie, who works at a housing association as a director of business operations, and nearly 2 years ago, he got his first Ned role on the board of another housing association. And we've got Gail. Gail is the chief executive officer at King's College Hospital Charity. A year and a half ago, she got her first Ned role on the Football Association's Women Football Board. So, Gail and Jessie. Gail, we'll come to you first. Why did you want to do a non-exec role?
Thanks, Sarah, and good afternoon, everybody. I think from my perspective, I've been a trustee of charities, and I was really keen to take a step into being a remunerated NED, thinking about sort of career portfolio in the future and why wait until I'm whatever age or whatever stage in my life where I think this is what I should do now, actually crack on and get some experience now. So that was my personal driver, very much about my career and looking ahead to where I want to be in the next sort of couple of decades, I guess.
Cool. And you, Jessie?
When I first became an executive 6 years ago, I was reporting into a board, which is a new set of stakeholders for me. And we were recruiting some new board members at the time. And I shadowed their induction and found myself ultimately being interested in becoming a board member and the kind of questions they needed to have answered for them as a board member by way of my executive report.
Oh, Jessie, we've never heard that kind of story before. Actually, seeing the Neds get inducted made you think maybe I should become a Ned. So that's unusual impetus. I wonder if anyone else has shared that. So, Gail, what was the process like for getting there? How did you find the role? And I guess you're a Ned in a sector that isn't the one you've worked in before. You can share a bit of your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, certainly. So, well, I found the role through dynamic boards. So I was actively putting myself into the market, looking at, various places that board roles are available to be reviewed and looked at. And so it was really great that the role I actually ended up securing was advertised through dynamic boards, and that's how I found it and came across it. And in terms of the process, I had one interview. I actually did that interview on holiday online on a tiny little phone, hoping that the hotel Wi-Fi would hold up, but it was clearly fine. And that was the process. And then I was appointed, which I was delighted about. I think the thing that might have been particularly for me that made me apply for this particular role was that they were looking for marketing communications experience, commercial experience. And I don't actually have much commercial marketing experience, but I do have not-for-profit marketing communications experience, as I've worked in not-for-profit my whole career. So I put that forward. I didn't let that stop me applying. And clearly I was the right person on the day for them, which is great. And I think in terms of sector difference, yes, I work in a healthcare sector now. I've worked in charities and not-for-profit. I think the only connection really with sport is that one of my other trustee roles is that I'm on the Premier League charity board. So I'm a trustee of that. And also I was chief executive of Dame Kelly Holmes Trust at one point. So I think I really drew in my application the experience. But yes, I'd never worked in football and not particularly in the women's sector. So it is possible to make that leap.
Thank you. And what about you, Jessie? Tell us, was this the first role you'd ever applied for?
No, so I'd applied for a housing association board before that, one that I really liked. I didn't take the spray and pray approach. I was really trying to target. That particular application said they wanted board member experience, and I had none. But I just sort of gave it a try, as you said, and really tried to make the case. I ended up getting shortlisted for that, was told I was appointable, but for where they were in their journey, they really wanted experience. So they said, go away, get experience, and we'd like to hear from you down the line. For the one that I was successful for, it was an interview with the chair, the chief exec, and another board member who was a tenant board member. But before that, I also had to meet with a group of residents that were engaged and involved in the governance structure.
And what about prior training? Did you do any training, Jessie?
Not formally. As I said, when I became an executive, I realized I had to report into a board and just try to develop my own understanding of what the boards need to know about, how can I proactively answer those questions, and what would I do if I was a board member? What would I say? What would I ask for? So I just found that was like an informal sort of induction, if you will, ahead of later becoming successful in the applications.
And what about you, Gail? You did do a little bit of training, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. So I've been on, as I mentioned, trustee of charity boards. So I had probably about 10 years experience of that sort of board experience to be able to draw on and articulate. And of course, it is training. Every day you're learning. And then formally, I hold the Institute of Directors Diploma in Company Direction. And a lot of that, as you mentioned earlier, the kind of MBA reference, a lot of that is not dissimilar, I think, probably. And I think both of those gave me the ability to articulate, speak the right language, raise the right things in those sorts of interviews, and of course, in the role as well.
Great. And what about being there? So, how have you found it sort of culturally joining the board and bringing your own thoughts and perspectives in your first few board meetings? How did you find that, Gail?
I felt very welcomed, very much like they were. So I'm an independent Ned, and there are other Neds on the board who are there because they have roles that sort of bring them to that board. And I felt very welcomed as a member, an independent member, and there are a couple of others as well. The culture is really positive, I felt very listened to, but I was conscious that you have to bring yourself and bring your experience. So I was very thoughtful about what is it that they have asked for in appointing me, and being really conscious of that and bringing myself to those conversations. And if we weren't having conversations about the things that I thought they wanted me for, then I started to discreetly raise that around the sides and in private conversation with the chair and said, actually, should we be having some conversations about some of these things that you're interested in?
Yeah, that's great. That's a really good point. Because I think often what they write in the advert can be quite separate from the realities of when you turn up. So that's a good shout, Gail. Jesse, what surprised you?
What I liked about the organization, it didn't actually involve my recruitment. So I was successful, but there were some candidates that were not. And what surprised me was the willingness to keep those candidates on board. So I guess that's a message to people that join this call. Over the years, people have maybe joined the committee, so not necessarily a fully fledged board member, but joined the committee to build up maybe the experience or the insight that the organization was looking for. So that was a pleasant surprise just to see that there was a retention of interest from the other candidates.
And kind of give us a sense of what is your board rhythm like? How often do the boards meet and how does that work for you guys, particularly alongside your existing work, actually? Jesse, go for it.
With my board member position, there are 4 strategy days a year in person, 4 board performance meetings that are virtual. And you tend to build 2 committees which have each 4 virtual meetings a year. Not every housing association is like that. Some just have you on 1 committee, some only have 1 or 2 committees, but it's important to fully understand in advance. Think about your reputation. So don't sign up to something without fully knowing the commitment or knowing the commitment, but just wanting to get a foot in, because ultimately you need to be very clear on what that commitment is.
Yeah. And what about travel? Are they near where you live? Can you give us a sense of that?
I go to Gloucester for my board member position. One of the thinking was I originally applied in London, highly competitive. Could I just broaden my horizon? My expenses are covered. I prefer to take the train because it allows me to do some work as well, whether it's reading board papers, whether it's doing the day job as well. So yeah, weigh that up with yourselves. How far do you have to travel? Are there any benefits you can get by way of traveling, i.e. commuting by train and getting on with work while you're on the train?
And Gail, can you give us a sense of your board rhythm?
Yeah, absolutely. So we meet 6 times a year during the football season. Those board meetings are around 3 hours. They're held in the daytime. And then there's also a strategy day, a full day as well. I think in terms of the other aspects of the rhythm, half of those 6 meetings are face-to-face and half are online, which obviously helps with flexibility. And I think, like Jesse was saying, I tend to travel by train because I think that helps. Generally, if the Wi-Fi is working, you get time to be able to kind of catch up on some of the other roles as well, or on the way home, follow up from things that came up at the board meeting that you want to engage with outside as well. I think you asked about how we connect, how that balances with your day job. I'm a chief executive in my day job, as you mentioned, and you also mentioned, talking to your managers. It's really important that my chair knows my commitment and that he is comfortable and I work with him so that he understands my commitment to that, and we're able to kind of, discuss that, and he's supportive, which is great. But there is a reality. I'm a mum as well, so there's a reality about time. And I wouldn't actually I'd be very unlikely to take on a Ned role or a trustee role that met in the evening. And so that does mean, if you think about charities, for example, charities that have a lot of volunteers, very volunteer heavy. I worked as an executive role for the Scouts, for example. All of their board and committee meetings were at weekends and in the evening. Now, that might really suit other people. So I think it's really important as a candidate to know where you're drawing your line, actually what's important to you. And quite often it's not that explicit. So really asking the questions at the right point in the process, being really clear, because they need to obviously know that you're committed as well, and you're able to commit.
Yeah, thank you, Gail. That's a good point. So, what's the mix like on the board before you've joined and the sort of representation of different skills and experiences and perspectives? Give us a sense of that, Gail. You go for it.
Yeah, so the board I'm on has, as I mentioned, some independent members who are all from other sports or have been players, for example. So they're bringing in different experiences. And then the other members, which are the majority, are people who are representatives from different parts of the game, the women's game, and sort of are there partly because of their experience, but they're in a role that's been nominated to that board. It's not all women, there's men as well, there's quite a mix. So quite a diverse board in its widest sense, actually. And so we have some good conversations because there's different thinking in the room and different, lived experiences come into the piece, which is really helpful too.
Yeah, thank you, Gail. And it's really important to understand that the power dynamics of having independents on the board and then people who aren't independent and they are there representing certain views. Like, great for Gail that you're there as the independent and just understanding that when you join, well, what perspective everyone's representing is a great shout. Jessie, what's the mix like on the board before you joined? Sorry, Jessie, we've had a little bit of problem with your bandwidth there. Um, we'll see if it jumps back. But I actually know from chatting with Jessie before, Jessie was brought in because they recognised that on that housing association board, there was lots of finance, project management, data, customer experience, lots of brilliant skills that they brought in from outside, from independents. But they didn't actually have many people who had experience of working in the sector, so in the housing association sector. So actually, it was a great asset to them that Jessie did work in the sector. You might find a housing association that's got the exact opposite problem and has lots of people that are in the sector and looking for someone that isn't. So what's really helpful is to look at that board and see the mix they've got, and also obviously read the advert and see what they say, because for most organizations it is beneficial to have someone from outside the sector. Gail's the person from outside the sector on her board and Jessie's the one from inside the sector, so they need a mix. Gail, do you want to touch on progression since you've joined the board? I mean, lots of people might be thinking here, I really want to be a non-exec. You become a non-exec, you think that's the goal, but actually once you become a non-exec, what could be the next step after that? Are there any opportunities once you've joined?
Yeah, I think once you're in and you start, feet under the table, you start to understand the business and, as you said, the power base and the opportunities. There usually are opportunities to get more involved in particular things that you're passionate about or that you think would be a development opportunity for you as well. So I've taken on a role which is the lead for player welfare and safety, which includes safeguarding. So obviously that's quite significant in terms of the responsibility and the importance of that for the board. That was offered out to everybody and I put myself forward for it. It was something that I'd started being quite curious about on the board, if you like, and interested in, and become more passionate since I'd been on the board about it, particularly the sort of player welfare from the perspective of mental health and sort of physical injuries, etc., that some of the women players in particular versus men are discovering. So things came to the fore. Jessie's also mentioned committees. My board doesn't actually have committees, but obviously many do. So again, putting yourself forward and spotting things that can take more time. So I guess it's a balance and a consideration about your own position. But I think it's a real opportunity to learn more and to grow and to give yourself more experience for the future.
Yeah, and I would say generally, like you mentioned, Gail, there can be specific opportunities like your role. Also, there's chairing a subcommittee. So you might be able to chair the risk committee, chair an audit committee, chair an equality and diversity committee. There'll be lots of different committees in different types of organisations. So you might be able to chair one of the committees. And there's also vice chair of the board. I understand Jessie's gone for, and then obviously chair. So there are lots of different roles within the board. So you might find that you get that opportunity to progress once you're in place. Jessie, I was just mentioning sort of progression once you're on a board. You're vice chair of the board, I believe. So I guess did you join as that, or did you get that opportunity later?
So just for clarity, it was vice chair of the audit and risk committee. That was given with immediate effect, was part at the time of the board sort of succession planning to just have at least a vice chair on every committee.
Yeah, that's a great shout. And so, Jessie, I'll come to you first. In terms of your employer letting you out for board meetings, what's been the dynamic of how you've managed that?
Yeah, thank you. So thankfully, I've had supportive managers who have recognized, especially being in sector, that whatever I might do outside of the day job within sector will add value to what I'm doing within the sector. But what I will say, don't take for granted that that will automatically be realized or perceived. So make a conscious effort, I think, to bring that added value to your day job. and to articulate how that's being done if it isn't being recognized. So yeah, I feel very fortunate that any manager I've had since becoming a board member has been supportive. I haven't had to take annual leave for say strategy days, but like I said, you do have to be demonstrating that added value.
Yeah, thank you. And Gail, you touched on it before, but can you tell us a bit of how you manage that with, I know you're CEO, so it's a different one. Your CEO is generally in charge of your own diary, but you've got a board you're reporting into. So how have you managed it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's about being upfront and having that discussion ahead of time so that you can understand any concerns or questions and kind of reassure, I guess, your manager, or in my case, my chair. I've largely had supportive managers. I had one when I was a executive director of a charity who really questioned it and said, you know, how is this helping? How can you do your busy day job? And I said, look, you know, with respect, actually, I've been doing this for some years here and in other roles. It was an incoming chief exec. And I said, so I believe I can, you know, there's evidence of it. And actually, as you said earlier, Sarah, this is the benefit. This is the exposure I'm having to actually you as a chief executive and your board. I can bring that and help you in your job because I understand what you're facing as the chief executive. So I think if you can also demonstrate how you can help your boss, that's usually a good thing.
Yeah, brilliant. And finally, we're just coming to the end of our session, but Jessie and Gail, I'll just come to each of you to ask for your sort of final message for anyone who's applying for roles. You remember being in this boat when you're applying for your first NED role. What would be your last closing tips for our audience today?
I think for me, really just go for it. Find something that speaks to your skills, that you can show what you can bring. Don't be disheartened by not applying. I spoke to somebody who was a Foundation Trust NED who said to me they spend more time applying for new roles than they did doing the ones they had. And I took a lot of solace, although that was terrible. I also took solace that actually you have to keep going. Even somebody who's really experienced has to keep going. So just have that resilience and go for it.
Thank you, Gail. Jessie.
Thank you. Be your authentic self and within your circumstances, consider what you might settle on or compromise on, whether that's distance, whether the role's paid, because it is a competitive space. But yeah, keep being determined and just, like I said, authentic self, consider what you might compromise on in terms of those other factors.
And I know you're really positive about sort of shadow boards, trainee positions, that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. If you put yourself out there, you never know. They might say, look, not this time, but if you come join our board as a shadow board member, you know, those opportunities don't necessarily materialize until you knock the door.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Gail and Jessie. I really appreciate you giving us your time and sharing your story. And for everyone who's watching, good luck when you're applying for your first or next non-exec role. And I hope we have helped you on that journey.